This is the culture.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast. Just another quick reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you like our content. Also, be sure to smash that like button and comment all your thoughts on the movie that we're about to talk about in this episode. We're also now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so be sure to give us a follow on those platforms as well. If you like this conversation and you want to see more from our brand, be sure to follow at Cinema Wave Media on Instagram and TikTok, as well as at _Culture Wave Media on Instagram. I am your host for today's episode, and my name is Darian Michael. And I am joined by the biggest Spider-Man fan in the multiverse for his on-screen debut here at Culture Wave, Michael Peniston. Michael, how are you doing?
I am doing good. I am ready to talk about this movie, that's for sure.
Definitely, bro. I want to start by just letting everybody know, if you haven't seen this movie yet, we're going to have a very in-depth, spoiler-heavy conversation. So again, if you haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse yet, click out of this video, add it to your watch later, go to the theater, see this movie, come back, watch our discussion, listen to our discussion. You have been warned, spoilers ahead. So let's dive in. This movie, 5 years in the making, right?
Yes.
The first movie that came out, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, produced by Phil Lord, Chris Miller. If you guys don't know, they did the Lego movie, the Jump Street movies. They're executive producers on the Apple TV Plus show, The After Party. Heavily involved in a lot of things. Spider-Verse was their biggest project. This movie came out a little less than a week ago, a little over a week ago, maybe at this point.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
And at the time of recording now, the movie has made $385 million. So that's just box office. But let's just dive into the movie as a whole, right? In terms of the time frame in between, right? 5 years, a lot of people, a lot of studios would probably be nervous about that. What was your thought process in terms of their decision to take their time on this? And do you think it was worth it?
So in terms of taking their time on it, I think that it was definitely necessary. And I think that they realized that after seeing the outcome of this film. I think that it was important to allow that. But I think that they went about it smart. I think that they definitely had strategy with this. It wasn't in that 5 years, Sony had a lot of projects and things, Miles related, Spider-Man related, that in some way or another, I feel like kept us, the anticipation ready for this film. With the video game, the Miles video game, that kind of introduced us a little bit more to Miles' character outside of the film. So I feel like, yes, it was a while, but I feel like there was strategy in that long-term wait. And I feel like the film itself it exceeded all expectations. It was amazing, honestly.
Well, I was going to say not only that, but we had a lot of Spider-Man content even outside of Miles in that time frame too, right? Like we had two MCU Sony adjacent Spider-Man projects in between that, right? Mm-hmm. We had No Way Home and Far From Home.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So one of the things I had thought about really heavily, even about maybe a little bit even before halfway through the movie, as I was so impressed with, as much as I love Into the Spider-Verse, how much better Across the Spider-Verse was. And the thought that kept running through my head was, I wish that other studios would do this approach where they kind of let things breathe a little bit and they took their time on a project to make it as pristine as they possibly could. I didn't feel like I was missing out on the character, but I was very, it built my anticipation with the time in between. Mm-hmm. And I was excited to see the next Miles story.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I feel that same exact way, honestly.
In terms of talking about the first film in comparison to this one, what were some general improvements that you noticed in terms of going from Into the Spider-Verse to Across the Spider-Verse?
So, Into the Spider-Verse is also a fantastic film. You can't get me wrong with that. I feel like going into this film, it could be that they had that foundation already kind of laid down. But I feel like the storytelling in this film was a little bit they honed into the story a little bit more. I don't know if that was because there were a lot of things in the story that tied from the first that made it kind of important, but I feel like the story was one of the things for sure that they got right with this, and the build up, it's unmatched compared to the first one, honestly. And then even just the animation style, I always thought that the first one was revolutionary in terms of animation. And I argue that to this day. But somehow the sequel, they revolutionized animation all over again, and it's I think it's opened the door, I think, for what could be a lot of possibility in animation. So definitely animation as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's dive a little deeper on that. So in terms of the animation style, or I really should say styles, because there's so many different articulate and purposeful different animation styles throughout this film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single universe that Miles and company visits, it's reminiscent of the comic book art of each character that's introduced, right? So in though Miles is the main character in Into the Spider-Verse, with this film, he is still the main character, but there's a very enhanced role for Gwen Stacy, right?
Yes,
and she opens the film, and it's a little bit of her origin story told in a similar way to how Miles' story was told in the first film. But there's a very distinct visual style that pops, right? It's very colorful. It's very kind of like watercolors, like paint. And that is very reminiscent of the Spider-Gwen comics. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an avid comic reader. I do my research before and after seeing the movies. But you can see that throughout, right? Yeah. Another character, Spider-Man India. It's a very specific style that comes across with him, Spider-Punk. So I thought the animation definitely broke barriers. And I think I saw something online that there were like 35 different animation styles throughout the film.
35?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow.
It's like remarkable how they were able to do all that work. And again, they had their time. They were able to take that time. But yeah, if you wanted to jump in.
Yeah. But it also goes back to that time frame, allowing that time for things to happen and to kind of like soak in everything. The Lego scene when you saw Lego Spider-Man,
great
and, like,
scene.
that whole world. And I don't know if you knew, I saw online that there was a 14-year-old that they saw that originally animated the trailer for this, and then they brought him in for that. And I feel like allowing that time 5 years, like for something like that to even be able to go in, like I feel like that just makes it all even more just important, you know, like they were able to find those elements and bring it in. And so that's why this film is so much bigger than it really is because, like, I don't know, I feel like they tied so many elements animation wise, bringing, you know, all of these, you know, the actors and the crew and everything and everyone that played a part in this film. I just feel like all of these elements honestly came together to make a masterpiece.
Yeah. So the other thing with that is like the effectiveness of being able to like kind of shepherd this young filmmaker who decides to do something because he's a fan of Legos and he loves Spider-Man, and then take the time where when he's not doing his classwork, he's working on a Hollywood project is so cool and awesome by Lord and Miller. But the other thing with that is it's an effective part of the movie, no matter how small it is, because at least in terms of my viewing experience, we didn't see the movie together, but that's why I can't wait to talk about this with you in a larger context. But that was like one of the biggest reactions in the theater for me. Like, people love that scene and people were laughing so much for that scene in particular. So just the love that Lord and Miller have for this character too, and the understanding. And again, so just want to highlight really quick, Lord and Miller, they didn't direct this film. They're co-writers. They came up with the idea for the first film, but Kemp Powers, Joaquim Dos Santos, and Justin K. Thompson do a masterful job directing this. But there's something that's very particular in terms of like Lord and Miller and how they're able to weave something that's very evident in all their films, right? Like a lot of it is, I was reading online the other day, we're talking about how they managed to make their daddy issues a big part of every single movie they've ever made, right? And you see that in this film to a deeper extent with Miles and his father. So I wanted to talk to you about that too. Father's Day's coming up. But like in terms of that dynamic in particular, especially in the first scene where he's chasing the spot, right? And he's having those interactions with his dad. How did that play for you in terms of the overall story with Miles and his father?
I feel like, honestly, this go round, seeing the relationship between Miles and his father, I especially after I actually got to go back and rewatch the first film, and you can see there is definitely a disconnect for sure in both films. A lot more this film, everything considered, with, you know, the state that Miles is now currently in. But I feel like I feel like it's definitely not only prevalent in this film that that daddy issue, I guess you could say. But I just the theme of that, not even just parent child relationship sort of thing, because it wasn't just his dad. You kind of saw that a lot with his mom as well in this film, like that whole sort of balcony scene, where he had that moment. His dad was very much also involved in that, but you can see how they could pour a lot of those problems and issues into it. I know the first film, that was, Miles's dad was a major part of the plot, and you can see moving forward that it's going to be a major part of the plot for the Beyond the Spider-Verse. So I definitely can see how that is a key theme in these films for sure.
Yeah, and I think also just the effectiveness of every sort of Spider-Man or Spider-Woman always has this deep theme with family, right? And it could be anybody. It could be uncles, it could be aunts, it could be grandparents, it could be dads, it could be mothers, it could be whatever. And going back to the scene you were just talking about, which was probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite scene in the whole movie, the scene on the rooftop between Miles and his mother Rhea, where it's like a very human connection that they have, and it's a very authentic conversation about, Miles, like, we don't see you anymore, and it's because you're growing up, and we're understanding that you have this person that you're pursuing in terms of Gwen, but it's a real conversation about the humanity behind who his character is and why his version of Spider-Man and all the different versions of Spider-Man and women are always trying to do it all, right? You see it very prevalently in the scene when they go to the multiverse with Spider-Man India, Prabhakar, where he again references, he breaks a canon event, which kind of sets this huge like driving force behind the movie, where because he's able to save Pavatar's girlfriend's father, everything gets screwed up in the multiverse. And there's this inherentness that belongs to Miles where he doesn't understand why bad things happen. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic with his character. And it's reflected even with Gwen's experience, right? With her father, where she's trying to do the right thing. And she, again, like takes off her mask at one point. And she's like, Dad, it's me. And he still wants to arrest her. So in terms of that too, like, I was really impressed with the way that they were able to juggle the emotionality of these characters, especially in the animation medium, because unfortunately there's a lot that comes with that, right? Like, some people believe that animation is a childish medium. I personally believe that this movie in particular, not that there aren't other films and TV projects that have done the same, but Across the Spider-Verse in particular should completely smash that mentality that people might have that animation is just for children.
I agree. I believe the first one should have done that, but this one, if that one didn't, then this one should 100% have.
What was something in terms of, again, talking about the second film to the first one, was there something that stood out to you that kind of completely shifted your mentality? Well, let's start with this. Do you believe that Across the Spider-Verse is a better film than Into the Spider-Verse?
I strongly do believe that Across the Spider-Verse is a better film than Into the Spider-Verse. I do. I believe that because, again, that story writing. Again, it's the story writing and animation elements for me that really do that. But I can kind of hone into that storytelling just because there's specific elements in the story I feel like that make this film a better film than the first one. Spot as a villain character alone. To be honest, I have never really seen anything like Spot before, like in terms of just a character. Like, I've seen that villainous sort of like just crazy, want to seek revenge and everything, but to see in a matter of one film a villain go from so corny and it's very much a comedy relief sort of character in the first 20 minutes of the film to one of the scariest things I have seen in animation to this day by the end of the film, like that. And simply just even by animation effects, like they were able to take away that distinct body shape of him and just have like it be like a sketch, and that was like terrifying. Like elements like that you could see are just so small that I feel like really made this film just like real like stand out a lot more. And also there were so many details, little Easter eggs, I'd say, in this film that you could tell. So small of details that like you could tell they had to have been like working on these little details for so long themselves.
Yeah.
That I feel like make this film a Spider-Man film for all fans,
Mhm.
basically all Spider-Man fans, and that's what adds a level of it being a little bit better than the first one to me.
Yeah, I think going back to what you were just talking about with the spot, which all great points. I think the one thing that makes it so eerie is, in particular, like going back to what you were talking about, how they're able to manipulate just like a circle and make it like a terrifying image, right?
Yeah.
The contrast between the visual, like the magnificent visuals that are in every single universe, right? And then you have these black and white. It's off. Like there's something that's a little bit off, and then it becomes a lot off, and you start to notice, right? So I think that plays a lot into it in terms of how they decided to use the animation style in particular with the Spot as a character. But Jason Schwartzman's performance too. Like again, he's the perfect person to voice this character, I feel like, because again, he's so many times in Wes Anderson's films and other movies too. He's always playing like this puny little weakling, and in the beginning, again, he's like this humorous villain, and Miles is laughing at him, like, and in terms of like you don't stand any chance against me, right? Like I've been doing this for a while now, like you're a newbie, like it's all good. I've fought a lot of people that are like you, no worries. To when he goes into that void and he starts to understand like what he's created, and he manipulates time and space in such a way that excuse me, he's jumping from universe to universe and wreaking havoc within like not a lot of time within the movie, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're again, that opening sequence, one of the opening sequences with Miles where he's going against the Spot, we're about like 20-25 minutes after that, where this person is a major issue that multiple Spider-Men can take him down. So I think that's a great point. I think that Miguel in particular too, and I'm a huge Oscar Isaac fan, but Miguel O'Hara's character too has this, he's such a like a hard ass, but there's a human element to him when you see the flashback of why he ruined a canon event and why he now runs the Spider Society, that makes it like he's terrifying. Like everything about the animation, the jagged, like the big body, that's just so different than any of the other Spider-Men that we see throughout the film.
Even just like his little like the score that would come in, like whenever he would pop up on screen, it was so like striking. And it was like, oh, okay, he's definitely standoutish for sure.
Yeah, it would blare in at these points, right? And I think in the comic they talk about Spider-Man 2099, his character, it's meant to be this, something is always supposed to be off with him because of this element of it's the future, but it's not the future that everyone always anticipated, which again, that's what you see. It's very reminiscent of his character, right? So in terms of his character and his relationship to Miles, what did you think about that scene in terms of them breaking down, where we get a lot of these Easter eggs that we talked a little bit about, where we see Andrew Garfield with Captain Stacy, and we see the animated Ultimate Spider-Man, and all these different characters that we see throughout these canon events that have to happen in order for these Spider-Men and women to continue their journeys. What did you think about that?
So the little details that I saw in those things, the small cameos, you know, that have to do with the canon events, I feel like it definitely added again a layer to it. Again, that being a Spider-Man fan and seeing that, and I feel like even before this film, canon, the term canon was always kind of used in like the fandom. You know, it's like, oh, like this is canon to this now, this is canon to this now. So,
that's a fun nod to the fans too, I feel like,
exactly,
being able to utilize that vocabulary and use that word, right?
Yeah, because I remember when why am I drawing a blank? When I think of the film, it'll make sense why I'm drawing the blank to the film. Morbius.
Okay.
I
haven't seen Morbius, so
okay, that's
okay.
Fine. Yeah, no, I remember specifically that film. Everyone's trying to think how Morbius was canon to Spider-Man and things like that. And again, that is also, there's also a conversation in that. You know, going back to this question first, I feel like these details were important in the sense of that canon, explaining the canon and showing how important that is to this life. This, I guess you could say, this Spider-Verse, or however you want to put that. I will say, in terms of Miguel, again, and I love this film. I love this film, masterpiece in my eyes,
Mhm.
completely. But I don't fully know how I feel about Miguel's character. I 50-50 only because I love the backstory, exactly how you put it. I love that we got to see that because that was very important, not only to his character but the story, in terms of knowing why it's so jeopardizing to him, like to that the multiverse is being tampered with and everything. And I felt like for his character, it definitely showed a lot more of just like the humane Peter Parker,
Yeah.
Miguel, I guess you could
Mhm.
say, in that. But at the same time, he was just like dogging my man Miles so much for no reason. Like, I guess I get it, like with again the story, like and everything, like getting to the end of the film and figuring out exactly why he's doing the things he's doing to begin with. But I just feel like I don't know. I feel like he just jumped right into aggressiveness. And
With Miles, I think he did for sure.
with Miles,
Yeah.
with Miles, he just jumped right into it. And again, I get it. His backstory, I get he's the future. Like he's in the future that nobody anticipated. But I mean, like Miles is a 15-year-old kid in this film.
Yeah.
Like he's just like going at it. So I don't know. Like that part of me was like, oh, okay. I like that, but I also am like, like, dang, do I kind of not like that?
I think you're a little biased because you love Miles.
I love Miles.
I know you do, and I love Miles too. The reason I like his character so much in this film, I feel like, is because, and we're gonna dive into the MCU connection a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this thing that happens in comic book films and the MCU recently in particular, where they have like these generic gatekeeper characters that like they don't. There's no like a perfect example to me is like as much as I love Agatha Harkness in WandaVision, right? Like, there's not a real reason why she's doing what she's doing. Like, she wants the Darkhold, but that's really it. And there's no real reason why she wants it. But in terms of Miguel's character, like, he has a reason to. He lost everything because he messed up, and it messed with his whole entire life. And now he feels this mission is to protect everybody and be this gatekeeper of canon, right? Of the multiverse. And I thought that there was a good enough reason and motivation for him to do that, where I feel like a lot of times with these characters, that doesn't exist. I think that if that scene would have happened without the first scene, too, with Gwen, right, when she's taken out, which is another super underrated part of the film, like the, I think it's Vulture, right, from that Renaissance.
Like the wooden Vulture?
So awesome. It's like paper animation, incredible.
Yeah,
so, like, again, that's one of the 35 animation styles that we see throughout this film, which, again, only serves the purpose of one scene in particular, right? But I don't know. I'm a fan of being able to understand his character and see, like, again, you see how jaded he is in the beginning, where Jessica Drew is the one that is able to convince him to bring on Gwen because he doesn't want to take on more people, right? Like he in the beginning, and again, I don't think you have a real reference point on how many months have passed since then versus when she goes to see Miles. We don't get a time code on that, right? Like a timeline.
I do. I think it's like a year.
Okay. I don't remember, but I can't wait to see the movie. Have you seen? You've only seen it once, right? Okay, yeah, me too. I want to see it again soon. I want to see it in IMAX. But in terms of that character too, like there's just something, and I'm excited because I think there's going to be more with him in Beyond the Spider-Verse, obviously, with the way that this film ends. And I think we're going to see a different element of him in the next one. So I think this is a really good introduction to his character. But I get it. I mean, Miles is one of the most likable characters I feel like that's been on screen in a very long time.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because he's very innocent. He's hilarious. He's cultured. I mean, this is the culture, if you guys didn't already know that. But basically, again, like there's this element to him that you're always rooting for Miles, right? So when there's this antagonist, and I'm happy that they created this character though, because it's not a direct antagonist like the Spot, right? This is this character where he's like an anti-hero, even though he's a Spider-Man character. So he was one of the ones that stood out to me. What did you think of Spider-Punk?
I love Spider-Punk. I absolutely loved him. I loved how at first you were kind of put off by him just simply because of how Gwen was explaining him, and like Miles was so intimidated and everything. But I
thought it was hilarious.
It was
so great. The reveal was awesome.
Yeah, but like the fact that he was so true to that Punk character to the point that he was willing to go against Miguel, and he was the only one, which kind of blows my mind. Like they have all those Spider-Men, and like he's the only, like one of the only ones that's
He's
really
an anarchist, dude.
Like I don't know. I thought a couple of them would have been on Miles' side, but like Spider-Punk, I feel like he was again important to the story. And for a lot of reasons, culturally, I feel like he was. I feel like he was in the sense of the character. And I just loved him. He was a real one, to be honest. He was a real one to Miles. And Daniel Kaluuya. I think I said his last name.
Yeah, Kaluuya. Yeah.
And he's amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's so good. And so I really liked him, and I just loved that. Honestly, it was the punkness that, like, to me, how he was so, like even going, not even being called Spider-Punk. Like I think he said himself he's against labels and everything. Like
Yeah.
And so I think you have brought that up, that it's like he only goes by Hobie.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I really liked his character a lot.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think the cool thing too with these films that every character is so distinct.
Yeah.
And every character is so themselves. And a lot of times, like, I don't know if animation has to do with making this easier or not.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have like ensemble films, and it doesn't seem like every single character fits, it's very jarring, right? Like if you have an ensemble and one guy looks like, or they seem like they're in a completely different movie than everybody else, that's like, it's you're like, they don't belong here. Like this is weird. But with Spider-Verse, it fits. I don't know if it's because of the multiverse angle. I don't know if it's because of the animation. Maybe it's both. But I think it's so cool how, again, introducing some of these newer characters like Miguel, like Hobie, like Jessica Drew, Spider-Man India, all that stuff. And then still being able to go back to these other characters that we saw from Into the Spider-Verse, like Gwen and Miles and Peter B. Parker. In terms of the older characters that we had seen previously, what did you think? Who did you think had like the most character development throughout? We see a lot from all of them, I feel like. Yeah. But
I strongly believe the most character development I saw was probably Gwen, to be honest. In this, film.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And I was honestly kind of surprised that they chose the direction that they did as far as starting the film off with Gwen's story. But once again, super important. Like I loved that whole intro scene where it kind of just set everything up, because I mean, like, there was a time gap in between, obviously not just for us, but in the film, and so that kind of explains very quickly what had happened. And in that story was quick, but like you got to see a lot of what made Gwen, and like we didn't get a lot of that in the first one. We kind of just saw that, and then granted, a lot of like that true father, story arc hadn't really happened, I don't think, time wise. I think it happened after the first film, but I feel like to see by the end of the film how the idea of, okay, like, yeah, like being a Spider-Man, like there are canon events, but we do have the ability to change it. And like how she was able to work things out with her dad in the end, like that alone, like was huge character development, I feel like. And even from the sense of like her not wanting, like the whole friend thing, like her not wanting to accept friendship or anything like that. And I watched the first one, and she says that like a couple of times in that film as well. And so I feel like by the end of this film that she's willing to put herself out there as far as to build a team and just to go out and save Miles. Like that's huge development.
Yeah, the production team positioning her as a second lead in this, I thought was great, because again, like I wish I did rewatch Into the Spider-Verse before I see this, because now I'm excited to go back and watch it and pick apart and see the little details that kind of carry over from film to film. But maybe there's no filler in this film, which I really respect, right? Like every single minute of this movie is earned. And again, even in like some of my favorite MCU movies, like that happens, right? Like there are some filler moments, and there are things where you're like, yeah, you probably could have cut that out. You probably didn't need that. I mean, I know we both love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but there are elements, at least in my opinion, there are elements of that movie that I can go back and I can be like, yeah, I could do without this. I don't need this.
Yeah, for sure.
Across the Spider-Verse, every single minute of that film is earned. Yeah. And in terms of the character development, I would agree with you. I'd probably say Gwen, but talking about Miles and seeing how he develops too from last film to this film, and trying to reckon with the balance of being a hero, doing what he believes is right, and trying to maintain a real relationship with his family, because he's making an effort more so in this, even though he's distant, to be around his family, right?
Yeah.
He wants to do the right thing. He's still like, as he's battling the spot, he's still texting his father, right? So he's making it a very apparent point. So I think in terms of the character development with him, I think it's really interesting to see the way that he shifted and he has matured from film to film.
Yeah.
Because and how is he 14 in the first film? So he's only so we're only 1 year of story built in, but he's matured so much in terms of that, and that's why I'm really excited to see where he goes from this film to Beyond the Spider-Verse, because he's already matured and developed so much over time in that 1 year. So I'm excited to see what happens with him, and I want to see more in terms of the way he deals with, and again, this is like a reveal for the end of the movie, but now dealing against a version of himself, right? And having to go against his uncle, who is such a obvious big figure in his life. There were a lot of things online about some people were able to tell that the twist was happening, and I think one of the things was that Rhea's eye color was different. And something else was they kept asking him about his hair being off, and his hair actually kind of was a little off. Something about like a purple tint to the world to kind of reveal that Miles was a prowler in this universe. Did you pick up on any of those cues, or was it a genuine twist for you?
It was a genuine twist. It was, when his uncle appeared, I was still honestly, I didn't even put two and two together. Like I was still just like kind of like, oh no, what is going on? And then I realized, oh snap, he's dead. Like, what is going on? And so like it definitely was not at all, I feel like, for me at least, in that experience, like I was genuinely caught off guard when the reveal came.
Yeah, I think I was one Uncle, is it Aaron? Uncle Aaron, right? Yeah. When Uncle Aaron came in, that was kind of where I was like, oh, there's definitely something off with this one, honestly. But the reveal of Miles as the Prowler too was something where I was just like not ready for it. And I was like, there's no way that they're going to go in this direction. And they leave you on that, which is so cool. So what did you think about the ending of the film too, and leaving you on that cliffhanger? And we'll go back. There's still a lot of other stuff to talk about in this film in particular, but kind of building toward the future of what they're going to do. And they've confirmed in interviews, Lord and Miller, this is the last movie that's coming out Beyond the Spider-Verse. So I think we're going to see a spinoff maybe with Gwen eventually or something like that. But in terms of Miles' story, it's a trilogy. So what did you think of the ending, and where do you think they can go from here?
I thought the ending I thought it was good. I thought it was justified. I thought that they couldn't give us I know that they couldn't give us everything as much as we wanted it. And that was like a really good in terms of like leaving it off on a cliffhanger. That was the best place I feel like they could have. I genuinely didn't see that ending coming, as far as we can talk about it like completely like this.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Yeah, him being Prowler, I definitely didn't see that. And it's funny too, because now on social media I've seen like so many people have like gone back to like the first one, and how many like hints there were where like the number is 42. Like he would he was swinging at one point in the first film and he fell, and the number is 42. He landed next to him, he bumped into. And then when him and Peter first saw each other, and his colors were purple and green. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, when Peter, the original Peter that died in the first film, when they first
Chris Pine's character.
Yes,
yeah.
Yep. When they first see each other and like they do like the spider sense thing, Miles has purple and green around him, and at first Peter's like, what in the world? And then it changes to red and blue, which means that his fate like literally changed in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah. So things like that, and then even the spider that you saw that
yes.
hit him
glitching.
Yeah.
Yes.
The fact that it was glitching and no one put I didn't put two and two together that it was glitching, and that if you're glitching then you're from a different universe and things like that. And so I didn't see the ending coming at all, but I think that it's a great ending.
Yeah.
I do. I think in terms of the whole trilogy at this point has been like finding your fate, discovering your fate, discovering your purpose. And so now for Miles to be in a position where he thought he figured it out, he thought everything was going good, and this is where he was supposed to be. And not only for it to be that he's not supposed to be that, but that he was actually supposed to be the Prowler, essentially, in his world, because that was supposed to be Spider-Man. Then that completely just kind of like that theme of fate, I don't know, it just takes that, now it challenges it all over again. And so I feel like the ending again was needed. And moving forward, I believe that we're gonna get a live action Miles in the third one. I believe Beyond the Spider-Verse, will take us beyond that element. But I also don't think this is the end of Miles Morales' story. I don't.
Even beyond the third movie.
I know it's the end for these directors and producers.
Uh-huh.
But I do think that this is the start of Miles Morales' story.
Comeuppance. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Why a lot of those Easter eggs that you just talked about, I wasn't aware of, which I think is so cool, right? How they're able to add these little elements that even like diehards like aren't super aware of until they do become aware of it, right? And it's just a testament to the level of detail and commitment that the whole team has in terms of the Spider-Verse team and Sony, right? I know a lot of people have been giving crap to Sony for a while in terms of the way that they handled, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Like, again, I love Andrew Garfield. I think he's a great Spider-Man. I don't think he's a great Peter Parker, but that's because he's super old. But in terms of like that, a lot of people think they didn't handle that. They rushed that whole process trying to do a Sinister Six right away. And then when they did the team up with Marvel Studios and Disney, they were able to create this great live action trilogy with Tom Holland. But Spider-Verse is beyond all of that. And you see a lot of, again, we're talking about spoilers here. There's a couple of live action elements to this film. The obvious one that stands out is Donald Glover as Prowler, which is a really cool thing. It was funny because I was in a theater, which I think was mostly kids, and I don't know if a lot of them understood. I had a freak out moment when that happened, like a verbal, like I was like, oh my God, but I don't think anybody else realized what was happening. But it was so cool. And I'm a huge Donald Glover fan, as I know you are.
Oh, yeah.
And he so much inspired the Miles Morales. He did inspire the Miles Morales character when he was written. But not only that, and there's another one that a lot of people I don't think picked up on it, but when Miles jumps into that other live action universe and he has that interaction with the woman at the convenience store, the Asian woman, that's Venom. So, and he's like, this isn't freaking you out? And she's like, I've seen like crazier things here before. So again, we're connecting all these different elements. And then of course the scene with the canon event, we see the Loki tree for the multiverse. So like you were saying, not the end of Miles' story. You think we're going to go live action in the third film. Are you nervous about them kind of dabbling everywhere with Spider-Man? Or do you think as an entity, if this team isn't behind it, there's enough that they can build off of where they won't screw it up?
I do believe that there is room for error with this sort of thing. I think that at this point we've introduced now a giant world with this, and like
strictly Spider-Man and women too.
Yes, strictly, yes. And like that's not even considering his villains, and that's also, I know they're actively as well trying to push a lot of his villains films and those origins to build up to something. And so, like, I do believe that it could reach that place where it's like at this point, yes, every Spider-Man is different in their own way. But it is, and this film kind of clarifies that it is the same story over and over again. They all have these canon events that are the same thing, basically. So, I feel like we can get these different, adaptations of these Spider-Man, and it can reach that point. But I think that it's honestly more so how they're able to combine them that it could go somewhere. And honestly, I do believe that there is a chance even with the villains. I'll give you a perfect example of this. I know you didn't see Morbius, but this is what I was bringing up earlier. When and it's okay. Do you care if I?
No. Go ahead.
So the after credit of that film, Vulture just randomly appears from
Michael Keaton's character. Yeah. Yes, from Homecoming.
Nobody knew why for like the longest time. And somehow this film almost kind of, because think about it, that medieval Vulture just showed up, and then Miguel kind of clarified that because of these like multiversal things, villains have just been popping up all over the place, and one of those villains was Vulture.
Yes.
So like that kind of gives sense.
And he makes a direct reference to the MCU, by the way.
He does.
Which is another thing we forgot to talk about. But yes, he talks about the kid on Earth, whatever he called. I forget what Earth he particularly references, but he is completely inferring to the point of Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in No Way Home.
Yes.
So he makes a direct reference to that. But
yes. So basically, I just feel like there is room that it could become a lot. I think that we're almost at that place with Marvel. Granted, that's a lot more, and this is one specific character.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that right now where they're at, they're on track for it to go well. You know, as long as they just don't milk it. I guess, you know.
Part of me is interested if they decide to go in a direction, like, especially going off the point you were making, if they decide to go not like a half live action thing or anything in the next movie, but like if we end up with a post-credit scene or something in the last film and Beyond the Spider-Verse where Miles is then in live action because he's a very important cog in the story of Secret Wars. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested if they're going, like, how are they going to handle that? Because, and again, Marvel doesn't, they're not like, Marvel Studios doesn't adapt like comics. They don't take a direct comic storyline and make it exactly what it is. Like Civil War is a perfect example of that, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not exactly the story as the comic. Mm-hmm. But I'm interested because, again, if Miles isn't serving that purpose, then are you going to do Peter? And then if you are you going to have Tom Holland's character meet a live action Miles? And
that's what
it's interesting, right?
Yeah, that's what I do think is going to happen ultimately. I think that these films were used more honestly as just establishing Miles Morales as a character, just because he was created like 2012
yes, he's a very recent character. Yeah,
so there's so many people who didn't even know he existed. So I feel like now with these films, if they decided to stop at Beyond and end it there, then like if they just had Miles randomly come up in Tom Holland's universe, you know what I'm saying, then at least people know who he is, so they can get away with something like that. I don't know. It's possible.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know you're a big animation fan too. Let's start with the first general question, and then we can build off of it. Do you think this is the best animated film you've ever seen?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what would make that? What makes the case of that for you? What it like? I know it's hard to wrap it up in just one thing, but like maybe a couple things in particular that give you such a strong feeling that this is the best animated movie you've ever seen.
Yeah, so I think the visual element for sure is, you know, one of the most important things with animation, you know. And, you know, there's so many different styles of animation. And most animated films that I've seen stick to that one style. And so, again, you know, when I saw the first one, that's why I was so drawn to the first one with its visuals and everything that they had done. But again, this one kind of just takes every single version of animation I could think of, and they applied
plus new versions.
Plus new, they did honestly create their own things. And so I feel like just simply because of how revolutionary it is, I feel like it almost has to be one of like the best animation, just because I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. And so I'm just so at awe, and in awe, I mean, of just everything that I saw on that screen, that it's just, I've never seen anything like it. You know, it was just so beautiful that it was honestly the best piece of animation I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But then again, the story again as well. I feel like you said before, a lot of people, animation is such a slept on genre as far as film, which is crazy because Pixar is like a thing, and those are some of the best films I've ever seen. But I feel like this film again, the storytelling with this film, a good animated film knows how to take storytelling, and because it's not like they're using, you know, real people. It's like it's which is could be a good thing because it's more room for imagination. But I feel like a good animated story has that storytelling element on lock, and this film had it to me. Like, this was one of the best stories, honestly, I've watched in a while.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's one of the best told stories in a really long time. And coming the multiversal element of it too is something that, again, like the film that just won Best Picture last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, a very unique and individual multiversal story, right? And the way that Marvel's been able to like manipulate this multiverse saga for themselves, it's like they're using it. I don't want to say that, because again, I love Kevin Feige and I believe in his vision, right? But so much of it can be seen as like, even No Way Home, as much as I love that film, that's a movie that the first time you see it, it has an effect unlike any other, and then every time you see it afterwards, it lessens because the draw is that, oh, we have all 3 live action Spider-Men on screen together. And then after that, it just kind of lessens and it lessens and it lessens. Not taking away from the movie, but as a whole, that's the movie, right? That's what gets people in theaters. That's what makes them really love that film. With this story, they're able to use that the parallel universes as a way to kind of instead of introduce all these different versions of characters, it explores what makes Miles unique as a character in particular, right? What makes his character the center of this universe, the center of these films, and the center of this larger multiversal plane that all these characters are on. And that's why I would argue, kind of shifting from animation to comic book films, I've always loved The Dark Knight. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. Heath Ledger's performance is incredible. Still think that may be the best performance ever in a comic book movie. I would argue that this is probably the best comic book film ever made. I think there's so much in it that is very direct of comic book fans, of people that are fans of art, people that are fans of Spider-Man, fans that are just fans that love story and love this overarching storytelling no matter how it is, right? And they're doing that through all different mediums. I mean, again, you see some live action elements, you see 35 different animation styles, you see the incredible voice work, all the people that are involved to make this 5-year project so incredible. So I would argue it's the best comic book film of all time for all those reasons. Would you echo the same sentiment, or is there still something that you think could overpass, or that it's not as good as?
No, I agree. I believe that this is the best comic book movie of all time. Infinity War is like right underneath here, but this for sure. I think again, I like it. It's honestly like you like bringing up everything everywhere all at once. I like that was a film I never saw. Like I had never seen anything like that, you know, in terms of a multiversal event like this. And so, like once again, this was a multiversal event film that I had never seen anything like this before, to be honest. And it was just, again, the best comic book movie like I honestly could say I'd seen. And it's just so like there's I can't even describe it. It's honestly just the best comic book movie I've seen, to be honest. It's just that good. It really is.
I think it's a classic that like will stand the test of time and will be shown for many, many years across every sort of animation school and just film in general. I think it's a masterpiece. Like you said it yourself.
Let me ask you this now. In terms of the character Spider-Man, just because we always, I know all of us grew up with Peter Parker. You know, Miles is such a new character and everything like this. What do you think in terms of the contrast in those characters alone? Just because we know now Miles is such a contrastingly different character in terms of powers, in terms of just his story alone and everything like that. How do you view those two now separately? Just because I'm curious, this film honestly made me view Miles a little different, but I want to hear what you had to say.
So you're saying in terms of last movie to this one, or just Miles in comparison to Peter as a
Miles
character?
in comparison to Peter. Yeah.
Okay, so Spider-Man has always been one of my favorite comic book characters. My favorite is probably Daredevil. I've always loved Daredevil, but Spider-Man's always been like top 3, top 5 for me. And I always loved the comedy aspect of him, and just again how playful he was with villains and things like that. It wasn't until Into the Spider-Verse where I viewed Miles as this different version of Spider-Man that I could appreciate and I could kind of level with because of so many of this interest that he had in terms of music and things like that. And again, like I'm a huge Donald Glover fan. This character was modeled after Glover as a person, right? So I relate a lot more to Miles, and I feel like a lot closer to the Miles Morales version of Spider-Man than Peter Parker. And I think this movie solidified it. I think it you're able to grow with this character in such a way where, again, and maybe it's because like my first interaction with Spider-Man was like seeing Tobey Maguire as like an almost 30-year-old Spider-Man, and he does a great job in the role.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, and Shameik Moore is 28, and I think so. I guess he would have been 23 when he did the first movie playing a 14-year-old. But there's that like his. Talk about underrated, man, like slept on. Like his voice work in this is so good. and it's so distinct. And Haley Steinfeld, I mean, everybody involved. I don't think there's a bad voice role throughout either one of these films. But to me, like Miles, it's hard because Peter Parker's been around for so long.
Yeah.
He has more history to his character, as we talked about. Like Miles is only celebrating his, I don't know, 11th birthday, right?
Yeah.
But I would consider Miles as like the standard now for Spider-Man.
Yes.
I would, especially because of the way that the story's being handled. That's why, again, I'm nervous for live action, right? I don't want them to screw it up. I think it has to be. It's a very important casting process, similar to like what's going on right now with DC and Superman. Like you have to pick the right person. So that would be my answer to that question. I would view Miles as the golden standard for Spider-Man currently. Yeah. Would you would agree with that?
100% agree. Yeah, I do. I feel like he just is so unique, you know, in terms of that character. And I feel like this film showed us that there are so many Peter Parkers, but there's not that there's only one Miles Morales, but there's only one Spider-Man Miles Morales at this point, and how unique of just him as Spider-Man is, and you know, down to his powers, which are so cool. So like, they're really cool.
He's very distinct.
Yeah. So I definitely would consider him that standard now at this point. He's Spider-Man to me for sure.
Yeah. So wrapping up, final thoughts. We've been talking for a while. Give me your last final thoughts on this incredible movie.
Oh man, I don't think I'll ever actually have final thoughts on this film, just because I'll
just keep building up, keep watching the movie, and keep having more thoughts.
Always. But I can say that you know, thank you to everybody that was involved in this film, because I feel like we were truly blessed with this film. I'm very thankful that this film medium and just art has this at this point now, because I do strongly believe that moving forward it will change the game for a lot of creatives, and I think that this definitely has shown a lot of people not to limit yourself with a lot of certain things. 35 different animation styles.
That's what I heard.
Like, that's insane. And like at times, like there were like numerous of those styles all in one frame. Like that's like things like that. And like there are people I feel like that would never think to do something like that, because it's so much. It could be so chaotic. And I feel like this film, it down to that theme of just like don't hold yourself back and throw all that you want into it and everything like that, which also could be, you know, related to the story, Miles's character. Throw yourself into it, things like that, your fate, you know, things, even if it doesn't seem like you're aligned for it. I don't know, this film I think is truly a special thing for all of us.
Yeah, I would say that my final thoughts would have to do with the fact that individuality and identity is such an important aspect of Miles's character in this franchise. Yeah. And I think that if they continue on that path, they're going to tell one of the greatest cinematic stories ever in terms of character.
I agree.
So continue on that trajectory, Sony.
Yes.
Keep doing your thing.
Yes.
Miles, we love you.
Yes, we do.
Sony, we appreciate you.
Yes, we do.
Spider-Man, you're awesome.
You are.
And I think that's going to do it here for the third episode of the Cinema Wave podcast. We covered a lot here, talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Just to sign off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I am Michael Peniston.
And we'll see you guys later.